Hi, you're on the Reddit Confessions channel. Let me tell you how a single knock on the door shattered the silence I spent 2 years building. It was early morning. Fog still hung like a secret over the hills. I lived where no one passed by accidentally, where GPS signals gave up, where silence wasn't a moment, it was a lifestyle. And yet, there it was. A box. On my porch. No postage. No return address. Just my name, written in the same handwriting I used to get on birthday cards. Hers. I didn't touch it right away. I stared at it for hours. Brewed coffee. Poured it down the drain. Paced. Thought about burning it. Thought about calling someone. But I don't really have anyone anymore. In the end, I opened it. I always open things I shouldn't. That's my curse. Inside, a photograph of me, sleeping, taken recently. The second item, her wedding ring. Mine was still somewhere in a creek 3 states away. Third, a note. Handwritten. Just one sentence. You left everything behind. Except the truth. I collapsed into the chair I built myself from splintered wood and pride. My heart hammered like it had been asleep for years and suddenly remembered what pain was. I had vanished after her betrayal. Deleted myself from the world. No social, no bank trail, not even a damn voicemail. And yet, somehow, she found me. And now she was sending messages from the dark, dragging me back into the life I buried. I told myself I'd never return, that I'd rather fade into trees and dust than hear her voice again. But she wasn't asking anymore. She was coming. And I wasn't ready. The box didn't speak, but it screamed. For days, it sat on the windowsill like a dare. I tried pretending it hadn't shaken me, but the moment I saw that photo of myself sleeping, knowing she had been that close without me noticing, it was like the forest around my cabin stopped breathing. This place was supposed to be unreachable. That was the entire point. I didn't come here for the view. I came here to disappear. And now, with one silent delivery, Elise cracked the wall I built brick by painful brick. I should have known she wouldn't leave it alone forever. She was always the kind of woman who needed closure, usually on her terms. But this was different. This wasn't a postcard or a tear-stained letter begging for forgiveness. This was a message. I know where you are and I can reach you. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was scared she'd show up. I was scared that I wanted her to. That after everything she did, some broken part of me still missed her. It disgusted me. She cheated. Lied. She humiliated me behind my back. I wasn't just a husband, no. I was the convenient placeholder she used while flirting her way into the arms of someone younger, louder, and more alive. As she once described him during one of her many explosive justifications. I never even yelled when I found out. Just packed a bag, walked out, and left the key in the mailbox. No text. No dramatic confrontation. I didn't want an apology. I wanted silence. That's all. And for 2 years, that's exactly what I had. Until now. The next day, I found footprints. Not mine. Near the creek. Just by the pine tree where I bury my food scraps. Fresh. Shallow. Size 8, maybe 9. They didn't lead to my cabin. They veered off deliberately, looping around the property. Watching. That night, I sat by the window with a flashlight and an axe I hadn't touched since building the deck. It was pathetic, I know. A frightened man guarding himself from a ghost wearing perfume and memories. I didn't know what I'd do if she came. Scream? Cry? Run? I hated that she still had that kind of power over me. And I hated even more that part of me wanted answers. Not closure. Just truth. The kind she'd never once offered me the night I left. But the next morning, she didn't come. Instead, I found another envelope, nailed to my door. It contained only a napkin, stained with what looked like coffee, and scribbled in ink were 5 words that turned my spine to ice. I never stopped watching you. I burned the napkin. I told myself it was just paper, just ink and old bitterness. But the moment I struck the match, the flames didn't just devour fabric. They swallowed 2 years of carefully built peace. For the first time since disappearing, I no longer felt alone out here, and that wasn't comforting. That afternoon, I walked the perimeter of my land, boots sinking in half-frozen soil, checking for anything. Any camera, wire, shoe print. That didn't belong. There was nothing. Just trees, wind, and the dull ache of paranoia. But by evening, it became clear I wasn't imagining this. A folded note had been slid under my door, tucked just enough to blend in with the shadows of the porch. No knock. No footsteps. I hadn't heard a thing. My hands trembled when I opened it, already preparing for something cruel. But it wasn't what I expected. The note read, "If you want me gone, come say it. Face to face." That was it. No signature. But I knew her handwriting. Elise had this habit of slanting her Y's upward like a child trying to write cursive. It made my stomach twist, seeing something so familiar carry such venom. I hadn't spoken to her since the night I disappeared, and she hadn't contacted anyone. Not my sister, not my old boss, not even our shared friends. For all I knew, she'd moved on with Bryce and built the chaotic, passion-filled life she used to dream about while resenting our stability. But now she was here or nearby, and suddenly I was the one being haunted. It wasn't grief anymore. This felt deliberate, intentional, strategic. She wanted something, maybe to apologize, maybe to blame me for leaving without a fight. Maybe she missed controlling me the way she used to, smiling sweetly while twisting my doubts into obedience. But what she didn't know was that the man she abandoned wasn't the one still standing in this cabin. I stood by the door for an hour, note in hand, trying to decide if I should drive into town, sleep at a motel, maybe even call the sheriff. But then I noticed something new on the back of the note, written faintly in pencil, so light it nearly disappeared under the fold. "You left your questions behind." That one line shattered something in me I thought I'd buried. Because she was right. I had walked away with silence, but not peace, not answers. And now, for the first time since I disappeared, I wasn't sure I wanted to be invisible anymore. The next morning, I left the cabin for the first time in weeks. I didn't shave, didn't change, just threw on my jacket and drove my old pickup to the nearest gas station 30 miles out, needing to see if I was losing my mind or if the world still existed outside these trees. The guy behind the counter didn't recognize me. I hadn't been there since I moved off the grid. That should have been reassuring. It wasn't, because taped to the station's bulletin board, between a poster for a lost dog and an ad for firewood, was a photo of me, blurry, cropped from the shoulders up. Someone had written, "Looking for this man? Call anonymously." No number, just a message. That's when I knew this wasn't about closure. This was a game, one I hadn't agreed to play. I grabbed the photo, crumpled it in my fist, and left without buying anything. On the drive home, my heart felt like a fist clenched in my chest. I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting her car to tail me from a distance. Nothing. But it didn't matter. She'd already proven she could reach me whenever she wanted. The isolation I once considered armor had become a trap. No one knew where I was, which meant no one would know if I vanished for real this time. That night, I didn't light a fire. I sat in the dark, with the note and the photo side by side on the floor. I replayed every conversation we ever had, every fight, every silence that should have been a warning. I thought I left to escape her betrayal. But the truth? I left because I couldn't bear hearing her admit it to my face. Now she wanted me to listen. I didn't sleep, just lay awake wondering if she was watching through the trees. Wondering if she expected me to come crawling out with questions and regrets like some desperate fool. But I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction. I decided I'd leave the next day. Not because I was scared, but because the person I had become in this place didn't deserve to unravel at the hands of the woman who'd already broken him once. I packed a small bag, left the lights off, and loaded the truck quietly. But when I stepped outside, something caught my eye. On the ground, half buried in frost, was a scarf. Not mine. Bright red. Cashmere. The same one I gave her on our 3rd anniversary. I hadn't seen it since the night she came home late reeking of cologne. She said she lost it. I knew now that had been a lie too, and somehow it had found its way back to me. I didn't touch the scarf, just stared at it like it might speak, explain itself, vanish. My hands stayed clenched at my sides, stiff with cold and confusion. I wanted to believe it was a coincidence, that maybe I dropped it when I left years ago and the wind unearthed it now like some cruel joke. But I knew better. That scarf hadn't just appeared, it had been placed. Deliberately. Like the note. Like the napkin. Like the photo on the gas station board. All these breadcrumbs, scattered to remind me she still held the map, even when I thought I'd burned it. I stuffed my bag into the truck and slammed the door harder than I meant to. The sound shattered the early morning stillness, echoing off the hills. That's when I heard it. A second sound. Not an echo. Something else. A soft rustle, too light for an animal, too steady for the wind. I turned toward the tree line, heart racing, eyes squinting through the branches. Nothing. Just trees. Shadows. Stillness. But I swear, for a moment, I felt eyes on me. Not angry. Not curious. Just watching. Measuring. I didn't wait to confirm. I jumped into the truck and drove, tires spitting gravel behind me like I was trying to outrun the past. I didn't stop until I hit a town with no name on the map and more closed-down buildings than people. I found a diner that smelled like burnt grease and old cigarettes and sat in the corner where no one would notice me. I hadn't eaten in almost a day, but the food tasted like dust. My thoughts were louder than anything around me. I kept checking the windows, the door, the faces. Every waitress became a threat. Every cough a signal. I was unraveling, and I hated that she was still the one pulling the thread. Later, I checked into a roadside motel under a fake name I thought of on the spot. The clerk didn't care. He barely looked up. I laid on the stiff mattress staring at the ceiling fan that creaked like a ticking clock. Couldn't sleep. Not with the scarf burned into my mind. Not with the sound of footsteps that still echoed behind me like unfinished thoughts. By sunrise, I made a decision. She wanted to play games? Fine. But I wasn't going to keep running. Not anymore. If she wanted me to face her, she'd have to speak. Out loud. In the open. No more notes. No more signs. Just the truth. I drove back to the cabin with one goal, to make her talk. But when I arrived, the door was wide open. The door swayed slightly, creaking with every breeze like it was caught between welcome and warning. I didn't rush in. I stood there with my keys clenched between my fingers like some half-baked weapon, staring into the shadows of my own living room. Everything looked untouched from a distance. The sagging couch, the mug still on the windowsill, the book I never finished left open to a page I stopped understanding months ago. But there was something in the air I hadn't felt since I first moved in. Intrusion. The air wasn't just still. It was disturbed, like something had been walking around inside long after it should have left. I stepped in slowly, listening for anything. Silence can be deafening when you're not sure what it's hiding. Nothing seemed broken, nothing stolen. But the rug was crooked, slightly pushed up at the corner near the bookshelf. I hadn't touched it in weeks. I crouched down and peeled it back. And there it was. A phone. My old one. The same phone I left on the kitchen table 2 years ago the night I walked away. The battery was dead, but it hadn't been there before. I would have seen it, which meant someone had brought it back and placed it there. Again, deliberately. I charged it in the wall socket beside the couch, hands trembling. The moment it powered on, I felt like I was holding a ghost. The background was still a picture of Elise and me at that lake house we rented on our 4th anniversary. I looked happy in it. Gullible. Blind. A message icon blinked on the lock screen. One single text from a number not saved in my contacts. You forgot this when you ran. No other words. No timestamp. Just that. I went to the Photos app. There were new pictures. 5 of them. All taken within the last few days. Me chopping wood. Me drinking coffee on the porch. Me asleep by the fire. Always from a distance. Always without me knowing. One even had my back turned. But I could see the edge of her reflection in the window glass behind me. Just a sliver of her face. Just enough to know it was Elise. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't about forgiveness. This wasn't about closure. This was surveillance. And she was toying with me, the same way she used to when she wanted something and didn't feel like asking for it. I didn't know what she was planning next, but it was clear now. This wasn't some emotional ambush. She was building something. A message, a sequence, a trap. I should have left again. But I didn't. I sat on the couch, phone in hand, staring at the reflection in the black TV screen in front of me. Behind me, in the hallway, a shadow moved. And this time it wasn't mine. I didn't move at first. Just stared at that hallway, heart slamming so hard I thought the echo alone might scare whatever was there. The shadow had disappeared, but I wasn't imagining it. I knew what I saw. The strange thing was, I wasn't afraid in the way I expected to be. I was angry. This was my place. My isolation. My silence. She had taken everything else, and now she wanted this too. I grabbed the flashlight from the drawer, flicked it on, and crept toward the hallway, each step slow, deliberate, like I was approaching the edge of a cliff I'd already fallen from once. The hallway stretched no more than 15 feet, but it felt endless. The light cut through dust, and at the far end, the bedroom door was slightly ajar. I hadn't opened it in weeks. I slept on the couch now, less comfort, more alertness. I nudged the door open with my foot, flashlight held out like a weapon, but the room was empty. Windows shut. No signs of entry. Just the cold bite of air and something else. Faint perfume, too familiar to mistake. Elise had been in this room recently, and she'd wanted me to know it. There was something on the bed. A leather-bound journal. Not mine. When I opened it, I nearly dropped it. Inside were dozens of pages in her handwriting. Letters. Unsent, undated, raw. Some of them furious. Others apologetic. Many made no sense at all. Half-finished thoughts, scribbled phrases like, "You weren't supposed to disappear," and "He said you'd be easier to forget." Then I saw my name circled, underlined, scratched out, rewritten. Again and again. She'd been writing to me like I was already dead. Like these were the only way to speak to the version of me she couldn't find. One page stood out, folded, taped to the back cover. It simply read, "I came here for forgiveness, but you weren't supposed to vanish so well. He made me choose. I chose wrong." That was the first time she admitted it. Not in person. Not through the phone. Not even through the notes. Just this cryptic message to herself, or maybe to no one. I didn't know who he was. Bryce? Someone else? Either way, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and dread. She had regrets, but she also wasn't alone in this game. Someone else was involved. Someone who didn't want her finding me. Someone who possibly had been watching too. I sat on the edge of the bed, journal in my lap, breathing like I had just surfaced from drowning. I needed answers, yes, but now I realized I wasn't just being followed. I was being hunted. I left the cabin before sunrise. No bags, no phone, just the journal in my hands and a heart that finally stopped trying to beat in reverse. For so long I thought I disappeared because I was weak, because I couldn't handle the betrayal, the silence, the humiliation. But it wasn't that. I left because I didn't want to become the kind of man who screamed and broke things and hated someone he once loved. I vanished because I needed to feel human again. And now, standing in the cold morning light with her words echoing in my head, I realized I wasn't running anymore. I was returning on my terms. Elise wasn't at the cabin when I came back that evening. I half expected her to be waiting. Another message, another sign. But there was nothing. Just stillness. I sat on the porch and read her letters one more time. Somewhere in between the hurt and confusion, I saw a version of her I hadn't seen in years. Not perfect, not innocent, but broken in a way I understood. She wasn't the only one who had chosen wrong. I had too, by never asking questions, by assuming silence was strength. We both abandoned the marriage, just in different ways. A week passed. No more signs. No more shadows. And then one morning, a car pulled up. Elise stepped out slowly, arms at her sides, no makeup, no mask. She didn't try to speak at first. Just handed me the photo I'd left behind, the one of us at the lake. "I never wanted to erase you," she said. "I just didn't know how to hold on." We didn't fall back into each other's arms. We didn't promise to rebuild. But we sat. We talked. For the first time in years, we were honest. She cried. I didn't. That was new for me. Somewhere in those quiet hours, I realized forgiveness wasn't about letting her off the hook. It was about finally cutting the rope that kept dragging me into the past. She left with the journal. I stayed behind. That spring, I sold the cabin, bought a small place in town, reconnected with my sister, started fixing old radios for fun. I'm not whole. I may never be, but I'm present now. I exist again. And maybe that's enough. Thanks for listening to my story. If you've ever disappeared, emotionally or physically, what brought you back? Share your thoughts in the comments. You're watching Reddit Confessions.